Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about cleaning. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, when would you need to do a quote unquote clean in your software development process? I'm guessing that you're talking about cleaning in the sense that cleaning code or what we call refactoring or something like that. So for me, I usually consider a clean a little bit of an anti-pattern, or as we sometimes call the big rewrite or things like that, because I've always disliked, well, not always, but I came to the realization that for some reason, well, I know why, or I'd like to think that I know why, but for some reason, quite a lot of software developers think in terms of either I'm working on a story and then you only do the bare minimum in order to ship that story, or I'm working on another story that is refactoring, and then I only refactor or so forth. And even though we do have something called the Boy Scouting rule, very few people apply it. Now, what I usually try to do is to fix things little by little as I go along. So an example would be if am working on a story and I know that the code that I'm writing on right now, or like the stuff that I need to add to this code, doesn't cleanly fit with the thing I'm trying to do, then I try to refactor a little bit before what's there already so that I can fit in my new functionality in a nice and clean fashion. And to me, for some reason, there are quite a lot of developers who dislike doing this because you scope creep and stuff like that, and I always make the same argument. My point being that the code that you are touching right now, it has to be tested, usually. And if you go and change arbitrary things that have nothing to do with this, of course, then you're increasing the scope of testing and the regression and risks and things like that. But if you do a little bit of Boy Scouting on the code that is now being changed, you will actually, I will argue, the net difference in terms of cost and testing, and if you have QAs and stuff like that, the scope doesn't change all that much. You have to be a little bit responsible here, of course, and make sure that you don't change something that is super, super, super tricky to change, right? But when given the chance, you should ideally try to do that, because otherwise it's very, very tricky for you to actually maintain the code over time, because you will make mistakes. There will be bad extractions, and what usually happens is, as I said, I call it shim programming. What happens is that you have something ugly in front of you, and you're not going to change it in the work you're doing. And you and I both know that you can say that, oh yeah, we need to clean this up, but if your mindset is to not fix it while you're there touching stuff, uh, which I argue you should be doing, and to put the backlog item to going back and fix it, you actually increase the whole cost, because now you change this, you add some shim programming things that sort of works, but really just makes the whole thing worse. And then when are you going to fix it? Because you know that the next year or like the next week you're going to have another story, and then another story, and then another story. Like you're never going to go back and fix it. And to me, it's a little bit like, well, there are quite a lot of things that I argue that can be that sort of, if you take something that you're doing every single day, like cleaning or brushing your teeth or anything like that, if you have a, if I'm brushing my teeth and I have something in between my teeth, and I'm like, if I'm mentally committed to, oh, I'm just gonna brush them now, I'll go and use like some dental floss later. It's the same thing. If I go in with the mindset that I'm just gonna do one thing here, and then something unforeseen happens where I get an opportunity to, or like where something else happens, like to have this sort of robotic mindset that, no, I'm not going to fix this thing that is like fairly risk-free or so forth and so forth. I'm going to wait until I have dedicated time to do that. And you have to play that a little bit by ear, and it's also about talent to a certain degree, your skill and so forth, because people who are really, really comfortable in their software development process, they will be able usually to more readily make these sorts of changes, whereas people who are not so comfortable will usually get a lot of anxiety and fear and like so forth and so forth. So I understand it, but the times when I do a actual clean, or when I actually do a series refactor, is when I see that I call it backbone features or core features, where the core of the software that we're writing, like the main most important things that we're working with, that has the biggest impact on the overall quality of the system, that the abstractions there or the state of that code is poor, because I know that due to the nature of how important these things are, like to give you a very concrete example, if you have a lot of API integrations or very weird data models or things like that for storage of data, retrieving and so forth, like that's the core stuff. That's the most important stuff in basically every single system. So if that code is hard to change or difficult to understand or not documented or anything like that, I need to fix that immediately, basically. And then I will actually go in and do that. I might not ask for refactor just because something, as I said, if something is a little bit ugly or you want to refactor and do things that are not as critical, I prefer using the Boy Scouting method. But as I said, if some of the core stuff is in a poor state, then I usually try to make I mean, if I can Boy Scout it, that's great. And I've never found it difficult to clean my software while working. I don't know if that's just me. As I said, it really is easy to say if you feel like you can do it. But for, say, junior software developers or people, even seniors who might not be as comfortable or so forth, it's difficult. So at least in my teams, I usually tell people that I will put if we do a pull request or something like that, and I see that, yeah, you did some stuff here, and I see that you could have done, like, I will put in suggestions. I would like it if you could refactor this or fix this. This is a little bit ugly or so forth. I will make those suggestions, and I have a very open dialogue with my team members, and I say, I'm not going to force you to do it. You have to get the sense for, like, do you want to quote unquote risk doing this? Because if it's not completely critical, if it was critical, I would say that no, I don't agree, we should do this before you do your thing and so forth. But usually I will sprinkle in suggestions, and then myself, because I feel comfortable usually doing Boy Scouting and stuff like that, because I know that I can do it and still ship on time and stuff like that, I will do it myself. So it might turn out that I clean a lot of stuff, or like I Boy Scout a lot of stuff, and my coworkers don't Boy Scout so much. That's okay. Like, I don't begrudge anybody for it. The only time, as I said, that I feel like we really have to go in and do a little bit of like real work is when I know that the stuff that is most critical is in a state where basically we have to compromise with every decision we're making. So as I said, it's classic. That's the data model is wrong, or the API integrations or something like that are like really in a poor state, or you have some very critical business logic that is like in just gigantic super function type of thing where like nobody really understands how it works, and you can kind of figure that out very quickly when you go to pull request and you see something weird, and then you ask like, why are you doing this and that and so forth, and their answer is usually, well, because that way it works. Like when they can't actually explain what the overall code is responsible for and doing and why it has to work that way, that's usually a really good sign that, okay, someone needs to sit down, really learn this, and structure it to make it fit into whatever situation you have right now. So what I want you to take away from this is that usually when I do a real refactor is basically when it's code that I know has a very, very critical importance for the system, because I know that some code is more important and some code is less important, and the stuff that I can clean by doing Boy Scouting, I try to favor that as much as humanly possible, because the net benefit, like the net cost, is lower. Because if you take dedicated time to refactor and things like that, it's going to be very slow going, and it's going to be tricky for you to get anything like that through all of the like stakeholders and things like that and so forth and so forth. And to me personally, having that mindset is like a doctor or a surgeon going to the patient and asking, should I wash my hands? Should I do A? Should I do B? Like at some point, I argue that you, as an industry professional, you have to be able to make the assessment if you need to do something to guarantee the safety and reliability and no bugs and all of this sort of stuff of your system. That is not a discussion you have with your stakeholder. Your stakeholder is assuming I hope, that whatever you're doing is critical. The times you try to get some stakeholder input is when you're going to do something that might risk something for their deliveries, so stuff like that. And so for me, like the whole goal of being like a really solid software developer is to get to a point where I can write all my tests and deliver on all the deadlines regardless of situation. I feel like I've reached that point. Like for me, like I've practiced and made sure that I know how to do that, and I've now reached a point where I can do Boy Scouting on top of that and still meet all my expectations. That's the sweet spot. So I never really talk to my stakeholders about doing these sorts of things because, as I said, to me that is literally like it's part of my job to do these things, and asking for permission to do it sort of indicates that it's you almost communicated to your stakeholder that this is optional stuff that we could could ignore. And the problem with that is that they don't know what they're saying when they say that, oh no, don't skip it, or you should do it, or so forth and so forth, because they always want everything to go as fast as possible. But I've never met a stakeholder who said that yeah, we should probably skip all the testing and all that stuff when you make them very aware of that. I don't know if it's going to work if I do that, because everybody wants the system to work, and so it's up to you to know how to make sure that you deliver as fast as possible without all these issues. And for me, usually Boy Scouting is enough. Sometimes I have to actually ask for a real refactor story if I'm dealing with something that is very, very core and I need to really dig in and understand how it works or restructure it so that it actually makes it easier for us to ship everything else we're working on. Have a great day.